In the shadows of American literature stands a figure shrouded in tragedy, a man whose life seemed haunted by the very darkness he wove into his stories. Edgar Allan Poe, known for tales of horror and despair, lived a life that mirrored the pain of his written characters. But behind the veil of Gothic fiction and literary mastery lies a more personal and intimate story, his fraught relationship with his father. The dynamic between Poe and his father was not only one of rejection and estrangement, but one that would fuel Poe's lifelong descent into loneliness, self-destruction, and an unshakable sense of abandonment. In many ways, these tragedies were a direct reflection of a deeper wound, a child yearning for his father's affection, and the ultimate silence that followed. I have no other friend on earth to apply to except yourself. I beg you for little aid, and for the sake of all that was formerly dear to you, I trust that you will relieve me. Edgar Allan Poe, November 18, 1831. This is one of the many desperate cries from Poe to his father, written during a time when he was not only financially destitute, but emotionally wrecked. This letter, like the others, serves as a heart-wrenching window into the mind of a man consumed by his longing for reconciliation, support, and even the slightest acknowledgement of love. Poe's life was a battle against rejection, and the letters reveal a haunting truth. His relationship with his father was a wound that never healed, a wound that bled into every corner of his existence. To understand the man Poe became, we must first unravel the threads of his early years. Born in 1809 to traveling actors David and Elizabeth Poe, Edgar's life began in a tumultuous storm. His father abandoned the family when Edgar was still an infant, and his mother tragically died of tuberculosis when he was just 3 years old. Thus, the shadow of abandonment loomed over Poe from the very start. He was taken in by John Allan, a wealthy merchant from Richmond, Virginia, and it was this relationship that would shape much of Poe's tortured existence. Though Allan provided for Poe's material needs, their relationship was volatile, filled with periods of coldness, hostility, and brief attempts at reconciliation. The letters Poe wrote to John Allan in his adulthood illustrate the deep-seated pain of their relationship. It's not just the financial desperation that leaps off the page, but a deeper, more tragic plea, a plea for the kind of fatherly love that Poe never received. In his letter dated December 29, 1831, Poe's agony is palpable. "If you knew how wretched I am sure that you would relieve me. Do not forsake me this only time, and God will remember you accordingly." Here we see a man stripped of all pride, begging not only for money, but for mercy, for the acknowledgement that he still exists in his father's heart. He appeals to Allan's sense of duty, but more importantly, to the memory of what once was, a relationship that could have been loving, but was instead marred by abandonment. The words are laced with guilt, shame, and the crushing realization that love, for him, was transactional. Poe's letters to his father are more than just requests for money. They are cries from the depths of his soul. These 5 letters, written during different periods of his life, offer a stark portrait of a man who felt abandoned, not just by his father, but by life itself. The pain in these letters is almost unbearable to read. Poe, who was by this time an established writer, could no longer rely on the tenuous financial support of Allan and was falling deeper into debt, illness, and despair. In his letter from April 12, 1833, Poe writes, "Without friends, without any means of obtaining employment, I am perishing, absolutely perishing for want of aid." The desperation in these words is haunting. It's not just financial destitution that Poe was facing, but the complete and utter loss of hope. Here, Poe lays bare the full extent of his suffering. He was isolated, sick, and on the brink of ruin, yet his father's hand remained distant and cold. Poe's use of words like perishing evokes the kind of fatalism that pervades much of his literary work. It is almost as if his real-life despair was the wellspring from which his Gothic horrors emerged. To understand the depth of Poe's suffering, we can turn to philosophical insights on the nature of parental relationships. As the French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre once wrote, "Hell is other people." In Poe's case, this hell was personified by his father's indifference. Sartre's existentialism reminds us that the relationships we form, or fail to form, can become prisons, especially when they are characterized by rejection or abandonment. Poe was not just financially poor, he was emotionally bankrupt, and the cause of this poverty was rooted in his father's coldness. The German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche offers another perspective on this dynamic. Nietzsche wrote, "To live is to suffer, to survive is to find some meaning in the suffering." Poe's life was undoubtedly marked by suffering, but his survival, at least in a metaphorical sense, was his ability to transmute this pain into literary genius. His stories of despair, madness, and death were not just products of his imagination, but were drawn from the well of his own experiences, particularly his unresolved relationship with his father. As the years passed, the emotional toll of Poe's fraught relationship with Allen became more apparent. Poe's life spiraled further into chaos. He struggled with alcoholism, depression, and an increasing sense of alienation from society. He lost his beloved wife Virginia to tuberculosis in 1847, a death that shattered what little stability he had left. Poe's famous poem Annabel Lee is often seen as an elegy for Virginia, but it can also be read as a reflection of his deep-seated feelings of abandonment and loss. But we loved with a love that was more than love, I and my Annabel Lee. And neither the angels in heaven above nor the demons down under the sea can ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee. The same themes of loss, abandonment, and unfulfilled love echo throughout his work, mirroring the relationship with his father. John Allen died in 1834, just a year after Poe's final plea for help. Allen's death was as emotionally cold as their relationship. He left nothing to Poe in his will. For a man who had once been a surrogate father, Allen's rejection was complete, final, and irrevocable. In many ways, Allen's refusal to acknowledge Poe even in death is symbolic of the way their relationship had always been, distant, cold, and devoid of affection. But beyond the personal tragedy lies a universal truth. The relationship between parent and child can be one of the most defining factors in a person's life, for better or worse. As the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer once said, "The greatest of follies is to sacrifice health for any other kind of happiness." Allen's emotional neglect and Poe's subsequent search for validation and love from other sources took a toll on Poe's mental and physical health. The void left by his father was one that Poe would spend his entire life trying to fill, but never could. Edgar Allan Poe's death is as shrouded in mystery as the darkest corners of his own stories. He was found delirious on the streets of Baltimore in 1849, dressed in clothes that weren't his own, disheveled, lost, and unrecognizable. Days of his life remain unaccounted for, as if he had slipped through the cracks of time itself, vanishing from those who knew him. Some say he fell prey to alcoholism, unable to escape the drink that seemed to chase him his entire life. Others believe he was poisoned, possibly by enemies or victims of foul play. I often wonder if Poe's death mirrors the life he led, an enigma wrapped in loneliness. Like a character from his own works, he traveled through life misunderstood, haunted by demons only he could see, and in the end, he died alone, as if the world had finally forgotten him. His death feels like a mystery never meant to be solved, just like the pain he carried. In essence, Poe lived and died in the same way, a shadow, cast in twilight, with truths only whispered in the night. What a tragedy to be so brilliant, yet so utterly lost in the storm of your own existence. It's impossible to separate Poe's work from his personal life. The pain, suffering, and despair that defined his relationship with his father bled into his stories, his poems, and his letters. In many ways, Poe's writing can be seen as a form of catharsis, a way for him to process the rejection, abandonment, and loss that he experienced throughout his life. His story, The Fall of the House of Usher, is a chilling metaphor for the way his own life crumbled under the weight of tragedy. I felt that I breathed an atmosphere of sorrow, An air of stern, deep, and irredeemable gloom hung over and pervaded all. The atmosphere of sorrow in the fall of the House of Usher mirrors the sorrow that pervaded Poe's life. The irreparable gloom that hangs over the story is a reflection of the darkness that haunted Poe, stemming in large part from his relationship with his father. A life of tragedy, a legacy of greatness. Edgar Allan Poe's life was a tragedy, but out of that tragedy came some of the most profound and enduring works of American literature. His relationship with his father, marked by abandonment, rejection, and emotional coldness, was a wound that never healed. Yet, it was this very wound that gave rise to Poe's genius. His letters, filled with desperation and pain, offer a glimpse into the mind of a man who, despite his many flaws, was simply a child yearning for his father's love. In the end, Poe's life serves as a reminder of the profound impact that parental relationships can have on a person's life. Whether right or wrong, loved or unloved, these relationships shape who we become and how we navigate the world. Poe's work will forever stand as a testament to the pain that shaped him, a pain that was rooted in the simple yet tragic desire for a father's love. If this narrative resonated with you, do support us. Hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe. Thank you for staying with us to the end. See you in the next video on Plaid Chronicles.